Hello everyone and welcome back to On Point Politics, and today I'm going to be doing a video discussing my latest projection based on the latest updated model from my channel. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new, and to follow Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below. And so guys, I have constructed a political model that is supposed to project the 2024 presidential results. Now there are two parts to this model. The first part is my part of the model, which basically takes into account the 2016 result, the 2020 result, takes into account how much the swing from 2016 to 2020 was, and it puts it down on a column here. The trend from 2016 to 2020. So for example, Nevada voted at a 2.4 percentage point margin for Joe Biden in the 2020 election, and in 2016 it voted by the exact same margin, but the national popular vote ended up getting 2.4% more Democratic. And so because of that, since it stayed the same amount while the national environment shifted 2.4% to the left, that essentially makes the state shift, or not shift but trend 2.4% to the right in this scenario. And so because of that, you would see that the state is moving to the right of the nation and is more prone to vote Republican in a certain scenario. And so that's what is accounted for there. The average change in demographics. So for every 1 point that is changed within the popular vote, you basically get this change in each state, which is a minute, part of the equation here. And that gets plugged in, which also factors in the projected vote share from RCP, the swing from the previous election, and the incumbent party approval rating, which then gives us a projected margin in all of these states. You could see Arizona's a 6-point victory, Georgia's a 4.2 percentage point win, Illinois is an 8-point win for Biden, Maine at large is almost a 2-point win for Biden, same as Minnesota. Nebraska's second is exactly almost a point victory. New Hampshire is like a 2-point win. And so if we go down, we're going to see this is the next section of the model where I have gotten this model for Gold Crown Politics. He's a friend of mine, and he was able to project the 2020 election 100% correct by basically figuring out the popular vote and basically figuring out where each state votes relative to the nation. And once he was able to figure that out, he was able to kind of get the popular vote and deduce how far to the right a certain state would vote in a political climate. Now, I have factored in demographics into both of our models to try to simulate the demographic changes that do occur when you shift the popular vote right or left as much as possible. And so basically, with all of that accounted for, our final margins here and our final margins over here are then averaged out to give our final margins for the model here, which would result in the final electoral college result. And we're going to be talking about that in this video. So I'm going to be filling out the safe Republican states, which would include the states of Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska's at large, with Nebraska's 1st and Nebraska's 3rd district. You'd have the state of Kansas, as well as Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, and Missouri all vote safe Republican. These states have voted Republican for the past couple of years. Indiana basically since 2008. The rest of the states have voted Republican for an extremely long time, basically since the early 2000s essentially. South Carolina is going to be a greater than 10-point victory for the former president. He won it by 11.7% in 2020, and I don't expect him to regress in the state as African American support is shifting to the former president by a substantial amount. Alaska, I expect to be a safe margin. However, in future presidential elections, I expect this to get a little bit closer. You could see Trump barely won it right above the safe column in 2020. I expect him to win it by around 13 to 15 points, but the model suggests that he's actually winning it by 16.8%, almost 17 points. And polling actually has this at a higher victory. Polling will actually have this at like a 20 to 25 point win, depending on the poll that you're looking at. And so even then, the model there is being very, generous to Biden. The states of Iowa and Ohio have been added into the former president's column. If you look here, the state of Iowa is an 18.1 percentage point win, and Ohio is classified as an 18-point win. Their voting patterns are pretty similar to how they were in 2020. Iowa votes slightly to the right of Ohio, and that continues to progress. And so when you look at these states, you see the 10-point shift in both of those states, and that's mainly because of white working class voters really shifting to Donald Trump, but also the MAGA base really being solidified in some of these already right-trending Republican states. As of right now, the national environment is going to be pretty skewed in favor of Donald Trump, as he is leading in the aggregate by 2.7%. according to RCP as of right now, and that swing is pretty large. And the incumbent's approval rating, which is Joe Biden, is pretty low. If his approval rating was the same as it was in 2020, this race would actually be way closer. States like Michigan, Georgia, states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania would be considered a lot more competitive. But because of the fact the aggregate has shifted so much to the right and Biden's approval rating is so low, that's why we are getting such lopsided results against the incumbent president as of right now. If we look at the states of Florida and Texas, you're going to see massive shifts there as well. The former president is performing extremely well in Texas. He's winning it by 15.1% as of right now. And in Florida, Donald Trump is currently winning it by 14.7%, according to the latest model. I expect these shifts to basically come from the Hispanic shifts that we're seeing nationwide, especially in polling data. The latest national survey from the New York Times Siena College poll actually has Donald Trump tied with Hispanics nationally. And if he's tied with Hispanics nationally, I would expect him to be having massive victories in Texas and Florida, which would basically negate any possibility of Democrats winning the Senate in either of these states. We'd also forgot to add Maine's 2nd congressional district, as this is a district that has voted for Donald Trump 2 times in a row, and I don't expect it to vote otherwise. The model currently has it as an 18-point win for the former president, which is significantly larger than his 7.4 victory from just 3 years ago. And so if we look at this, Biden currently in California is up by a safe margin. He is projected to win the state by 18.5, which is 11 points lower than what it was in 2020. So you are going to see a massive shift in the state of California, but is not necessarily going to trend that much to the right. In this scenario, Hawaii is a state that's going to trend significantly to the right. It is only a 15-point win. It's actually closer than California, which is pretty interesting. In this scenario, it voted by a 29.5 percentage point margin for Joe Biden in the 2020 election. However, after his Maui response here to the fires and a lot of voters being dissatisfied for that, the polling accounts for that dissatisfaction, and we can see that Biden's polling here has gone significantly closer, but it is not going to be classified as a likely state or below a safe state as of right now. If we keep going, we're going to see that the states of, D.C., Maryland, Massachusetts, Vermont are still going to be safe Democrat, as well as Connecticut, Delaware, and Rhode Island. These states are still voting over 10 points for the incumbent president. Connecticut is an 11.7 victory, Delaware at 10.6, which are still way closer than before. I mean, Connecticut voted 20 points for Biden. Delaware was a 19-point win for Biden in the last election. So these margins are significantly closer than the last cycle, which is a big warning sign for the incumbent president. Coming into the next states, New York is still a safe Democratic state. However, once again, you're seeing a nationwide shift. Biden is only winning the state by 12.7%, which is almost half of the margin that he won it by in 2020, which was a 23.1 percentage point margin in the last election. This is mainly due to the, Trump political indictments that are occurring right now, as well as major shifts with Hispanics and African American voters, which is causing this huge shift in this deep Democratic state. If we look at the state of Illinois, we're actually going to see it's going to vote under a 10-point margin. It's actually a 6.2 percentage point victory for the incumbent president, which is 11 points, less than what he won it by in 2020, which is a big warning sign for the incumbent president that the model even has it this competitive. This state is actually closer than what it even, Virginia even voted by in 2020, even Colorado and New Mexico. So this is showing that the state is definitely trending to the right this cycle as of right now by a large amount. Colorado is actually listed as a 6.3 percentage point victory, so it's only voting slightly to the left of Illinois, which is interesting because in the last election, Illinois voted to the left of Colorado by around 3.5 percentage points. And so the fact that now Colorado is about to be voting to the left of Illinois just shows how much Colorado has trended to the left compared to the rest of the nation. If we look at New Jersey, it is a 6.1 percentage point victory for the incumbent president, which is still significantly closer than 2020. In 2020, Biden won it by 15.9%. Again, major shifts with white working class voters, Hispanic voters, African American voters are really pushing the state to the right in polling. The latest poll actually has it with Biden only ahead by 5 points. And if you were to apply the 2020 polling error there, like I did in my last video, Biden actually only wins the state by around a tilt margin, which would be catastrophic to the campaign, because at that point he'd probably be losing Virginia, he'd be losing Minnesota, New Mexico, and a variety of other states. And so as we keep looking, you're going to see that, this is looking really bad for Joe Biden. 9.9 percentage point victory in Washington. Biden won Washington by 19.2%. So this is almost 10 points less than it was in the last election. Oregon, an 8.6 percentage point win for Biden. As of right now, we see that Biden won it by 16.1%. So the state doesn't shift nearly to the right as much as Washington did, but it is still shifting to the right regardless. And we're going to be coming up to these more, quote unquote competitive states. But what's actually quite funny about the competitive states from last cycle is that they're not going to be nearly as close as they were 4 years ago. If we look at the first state, which is North Carolina, you're actually going to see the model has it as a 10.8 percentage point victory for the former president. And I'm actually going to look at polling data to suggest why this could be a realistic possibility. If you look at Donald Trump, he's currently leading the aggregate by 2.7%. He's always been underestimated in the aggregate by around 2 to 3 points. And so Trump plus 5, could be a realistic possibility on the table just from polling errors from historical elections alone. And if we were to look at the average in North Carolina in the 5-way race, which is the aggregate I always use, Donald Trump's ahead by 7.5 percentage points. Trump in the last election was underestimated by over a point in 2020 and and in 2016 he was underestimated by 3 points, and Clinton is less popular, or is more popular than Biden is right now. Biden actually has a worse favorable right now than even Clinton did on election day. Clinton only had a 42% favorable. Biden's at 39. So you could even make the case that the margin of error could be even greater. So if Trump gets underestimated in North Carolina by those 3 points that he did in 2016, a Trump plus 10.5 percentage point victory is definitely on the table as of right now. The next state we're going to be looking at is the state of Georgia, where Donald Trump is leading by 7.9 percentage points. This would be a historic shift from 2020. Biden was able to win it into 2020 by 0.24% with high African American turnout in the Atlanta area. In the Atlanta suburbs, however, due to Trump gaining with African American voters, white working class voters, Hispanic voters in the Atlanta area, it's just not looking good for Joe Biden. And the model currently has Trump winning it by a bigger margin than he even did in 2020. And again, we're going to look at polling to show that this is a realistic possibility. As of right now in Georgia, Donald Trump is currently ahead in the aggregate in the 5-way race by 6.4% as of right now. And the model has him at 7.9%. Now, he was overestimated both times, but again, Biden's favorable is much lower compared to before, and Trump is only sitting at 43% as of right now. Beforehand, Donald Trump would definitely be ahead by quite a bit more. Donald Trump has gotten around 48, 49% of the vote in Georgia, even over 50%, in 2016. And so he could possibly get a higher vote share. Now, Biden could as well, but I think that Trump could easily be underestimated in the state of Georgia. And so that 7.9 percentage point victory is not outside the realm of possibility based on polling, and shows that the model is not really just a fluke, or is something that I just kind of threw together. I really put deep thought into this and how it would kind of calculate itself, and it's kind of aligning with polling. As of right now, we're going to go to the state of Arizona. If we look at Arizona, Donald Trump's ahead by 5.6% in the aggregate, and the model has him winning it by 7.7%. And what's interesting is that if you go to the Biden aggregate, Biden was overestimated in the state by 0.6%, and Clinton was actually underestimated by 0.5. And so the polls in RCP have usually tended to be somewhat spot on. 538 had Biden ahead by 2 points, so that overestimated Biden by around 2 points. And if you look at that, Donald Trump currently in the aggregate in Arizona in the 5-year race is ahead by 5.6, and if you were to apply a 2.3 point, swing in Trump's favor due to underestimation from previous polling errors, he'd be up by around 7 or 8 points, which is where my model for Arizona currently resides. If we look at Nevada, which is a behemoth of a shift. I mean, the latest New York Times Siena College poll has Trump ahead by 13, which is absolutely insane. And Nevada voted for Biden last time. This is a state that Trump didn't even win in the last cycle, and he's still leading by a monstrous amount. He's leading by 8.8% in the national aggregate, almost 9 points. And right now, my model currently has him winning it by 9.1%. So polling is actually pretty in line with what the model is showing right now. That puts the state in the likely column, and we already know that Trump has always been overestimated in Nevada in most polling aggregates. But however, Biden's approval rating is much lower than what it was before. So there is a possibility Trump could be underestimated once again. You got to account for the plus or minus 3-point margin of error. So this margin of victory is within the margin of error, plus or minus, with the aggregate that's currently online from RCP. So again, this 9.1 percentage point margin of victory is within a realm of possibility, just looking at the margin of error poll from this aggregate for Nevada. That puts Trump at 268 electoral votes, putting him within striking distance. But before we get to the Rust Belt, I want to get to New Mexico and Virginia. New Mexico is interesting because it is a 0.1 percentage point margin for the incumbent president. It's extremely close. It voted by a safe margin in 2020. It actually voted 10.8 points for Biden, and it's mainly because the white vote in New Mexico actually keeps the state very Democratic, but with major Hispanic gains for Donald Trump and the GOP, and some shifts in white vote into 2024. Combining those two demographic shifts, you're going to see New Mexico possibly get closer, and the model currently has it within a striking distance for Trump to possibly have it as a pickup state in 2024. If we look at Virginia, Biden's actually up in the state by 1.6%. And what's actually funny is that there was a poll today that actually had Biden up in Virginia by only 1 percentage point. So again, the model is kind of in line with polling in a way, which is pretty interesting. And polling errors are supposed to be accounted for as much as possible within the model as well. And so Biden has just crossed 200 electoral college votes. If we look at New Hampshire, Biden is actually winning it by the exact same amount that he's winning New Mexico by, which is really interesting. They're both very similar politically. If we look at Maine's 1st district, we see Biden's winning that by 18 points, and Maine at large is actually a tilt margin for Biden as well, putting him at 215 electoral college votes. And Donald Trump has officially won this election based off this model with the victory in Nebraska, which would put him at 269 electoral college votes. Nebraska's second has been redistricted to be a little bit more Republican, and the only poll out of the district actually has Trump up by 3 points, and he's been underestimated in that aggregate before. So hopefully we get more polls and we can get a better idea of how that, electoral vote's looking. But as of the only poll that's been out, Donald Trump is looking strong there. And if he were to get 269 electoral votes in the contingent election in the Congress, he would probably end up winning the election automatically, because more states have more Republican representatives and each state would get one singular vote, and he has the majority of the delegations as of right now, just strictly based on party, and he would more than likely come out on top just with the Sunbelt and Nebraska's second district, which puts Donald Trump at a pretty strong point in the electoral college here. Minnesota, according to the model, is actually pretty interesting, because we're going to get to that later. I actually didn't realize Donald Trump was winning it in the model. Wisconsin is a 9-point victory for the former president, according to the model. And you might be like, oh, Wisconsin plus 9? That's absolutely insane. How could you even say that? Guys, if you look at the polling, Donald Trump in the five-way race is up by 1.2%. In the 538 aggregate, he was underestimated by 8 points. In the RCP aggregate, he was underestimated by 6 points. Wisconsin is notorious for huge polling errors. So if he is underestimated in Wisconsin, even by a couple of points, I mean, he still wins it, but usually his minimum underestimation in Wisconsin tends to be pretty large. You could even see here, in 2016, he was underestimated by around 6 points. And if you look over here at the RCP aggregate, you're going to see the same thing, about 6 points. And so if you were to apply that 6-point underestimation factor to him, he would win Wisconsin by 7.2%, just based off of polling, which would not be that off from this 9-point victory. It wouldn't be that off. So the 9-point victory is somewhere in the realm of possibility as well. Now that is more of a stretch. I'd say a 6 or 7 point win, given off the historical, data and trends as of right now, would be more realistic. But Trump plus 9 is on the table based out of current polling. If we look at the state of Michigan, Donald Trump is up in the state by 6.8%. Biden actually took the lead in the 5-way race. Finally, after a couple of months, he finally took the lead in the state of Michigan. However, once again, the aggregate always tends to underestimate Trump as well. He got underestimated by around 2 points in 2020. If you look at 2016, he got underestimated by 3 points. So this, just because Biden took the lead, let's talk elections, does not mean he is now the favorite to win Michigan. Now, do I think that the 6.8 percentage point victory is on the table? I think it could be on the table, just because of the fact you do have the Israel-Hamas war, you do have all these conflicts going on, and that's, very turning off a lot of people, in places like Dearborn, Wayne County, etc. And on top of that, you have the EV mandate, you have white working class voters shifting to Trump, you have African-American votes shifting towards Trump. So it's all the wrong recipe for, Joe Biden in the state of Michigan. However, I'd say a 3 to 5 point victory is more realistic for Donald Trump as of right now, but we're going based off my model, and this puts Michigan as a 6.8 percentage point victory for the former president. Pennsylvania, a state that Republicans have been gaining in voter registration continuously for months, is listed as an 8.2 percentage point victory for Donald Trump. Now again, do I think it's going to vote like that? Possibly not. Donald Trump is up in the 5-way aggregate by 2 points. In 2020, the aggregate was actually pretty spot on, but this is when Biden's favorability was much higher, so you can make the case he probably gets underestimated there, and even Trump was underestimated in Pennsylvania in the 2020 election, when his candidate had a way less favorable than 52%, which is what Biden had. So it seems like the lower the challenger to Trump is polling, the more they actually get overestimated by, which is pretty interesting. to look at that. And so that puts Pennsylvania in the likely Republican column. And if we look at Minnesota, we're going to see this listed as a 0.4 percentage point margin for the former president. This state has not voted Democrat since 1972, where Nixon only won it by 5.5%. In basically a R plus like 20 national environment. He only won it by 5 points, showing that he has voted quite to the left the past few cycles. Now, Reagan came pretty close to winning it, but he couldn't even win it. It was the most Democratic state in the whole nation at the time, and it's been one of the more Democratic states. Even at one point, it was more Democratic than New York. Massachusetts this cycle became more Democratic and Iowa did, but Minnesota has always tended to be one of the more Democratic states of the entire nation. It's not until recently that it's actually been trending somewhat Republican. Ever since the early 2000s, it's kind of started trending Republican. In 2016, we really saw Donald Trump come within striking distance of winning the state. And that is on the table now because there are polls that have Trump ahead in Minnesota, and the aggregate currently has Biden ahead by a very slim margin. And so this could honestly go either way. I mean, Biden could win it again. Trump could win it again based out of current polling, but the model currently has it as a tilt margin for the former president. And that is it for this video. Donald Trump is at 323 electoral college votes to Joe Biden's 215 electoral college votes based out of the latest result from my model. If you guys did enjoy this analysis, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, make sure to follow the Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below. And I will see you guys very, very soon.